Hello, everybody. Hello, Matt. Yeah, I want to welcome everybody here to our service. We're glad to have you with us tonight. You're in for a treat. We'll explain we'll not explain our speaker. We'll introduce our speaker in a few minutes when it's time, but we're going to go ahead and get going with our announcements and our devotional time together before we dismiss our children. Sick of our number that we want to remember, we don't have anyone new per se. We have the ones that we've been praying for on our list. Dawn Patterson did come through her surgery. She had a detached retina, and she came through her surgery okay. We have some food that's going to her. Her husband, she had that surgery on Tuesday. Her husband had surgery today, and the last one I checked, he was still in surgery, but that was earlier this earlier in the day. But it was supposed to be routine for him. He was released. They let him come home, okay, because she was thinking they might have to keep him with a drain, but he got to come home, so that's good. Also, we want to remember Brooks's mother. She is still in Birmingham. She was supposed to go home earlier, and we announced that. It was in the bulletin that she was going to get to go home, but she did not get to go home yet, so just remember that family in your prayers. Stacy Martin's dad, he was released from the hospital. He was in the hospital earlier this week. Zach is back home as well. Zach Phillips, we announced him having to go back to the hospital. Bill Holman is going to he's meeting with a surgeon, going to be undergoing have to go through another surgery, so just keep him in your prayers as well. Other announcements we took down the backdrops, but we moved one of them in there for our directories. We still have some of you that need to get your picture made for the directory, and we would love to make sure we get that. We'll be if you have it, they'll be getting us a list soon, and we'll be contacting you about setting up a time where we could get it. Maybe even if we have to come to your house and get it. But we need to have those directory pictures so we can get going on that. And we were hoping to have that ready with the calendar, but we'll just have the calendar out in a few weeks for you, and we'll have to wait on the directory to make sure we get everybody that we can on that. Are you done with the honey? Okay, you still have honey. We still have honey. We had to purchase that ahead. There's several jars of it in there, and 36 left. Colton, there you go. 36 jars of honey at $12.50 a jar. That comes to a lot of money. So if you want to buy some honey, just give that to Justin, and that'll all go to the Student Center. Christmas cards, we've already got some of them. If you want to check your mailbox tonight, people have already been dropping off some of those Christmas cards. There's a few pictures in there. If you want to go in and get those now, you can. If you like to have them up at your house, you're welcome to do that. They're certainly not all there yet, but that is for you to enjoy, and we'll continue to do that for the next few weeks. Card pounding, we'll hold that out for another week with Jan O'Kelly and Diane Romine. Youth announcements, we have the Shopping for Kids Christmas that we have been doing, where we meet here and we go. We're not having to meet here to go. If you don't know what's going on with that, teens, you need to see Justin. He's got lists to make sure he gives to you, and we'll be buying that on our own. Or parents. You can meet with him, and we can get the list that we need from those children, and we can purchase those gifts. We can bring them up here and make sure they get delivered to the appropriate families. But the youth meeting, the parents and youth meeting, is this Sunday at 4:15. And the Christmas party for the children, for the kids, will be the 19th, and that's a week from Sunday. Is that right? A week from Sunday? And Christy Woodfin is handling that. She is in need of some sugar cookies or gingerbread cookies, if you want to bring those. And you can just set them back here, and we'll make sure they get to the appropriate place. For our services tonight, Austin, will you lead us in our opening prayer? And Ken, if you don't mind, Ken Hoff, you will lead us in our dismissal prayer. Nathan Daly is here to bring us our favorite preacher, favorite lesson tonight. And I'll introduce him in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and get started with our service. John.
You are the words and the music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praise your name I will bring. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song that I sing. You are the
pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day and all many blessings that you've given us, Lord. I ask that you please be with the sick and those in the hospital, especially please be with those that are sick at this congregation, Lord. At this time, I ask that you please be with them and help them to get back to us as soon as possible, Lord. I ask you please be with the troops that are fighting for our freedom, Lord, and I ask that you please be with the country at this time and everything that's going on with this virus and everything, Lord. I just ask that you please be with everybody, and I just thank you for everything that you've given us. Just now I pray. Amen.
This time we'll also dismiss our young ones for their classes. How do you explain? How do you describe love that goes from east to west and runs as deep as it is wide? You all are hope, you all are faith. Words cannot express the love we feel, but we long for you to hear. So listen to our hearts, hear our spirit sing, a song of praise that flows for those you have redeemed. We will use the words we know to tell you what an awesome God you are. The words are not enough to tell you of our love, so listen to our hearts. Words can fall like rain from these lips of mine. If I had 1,000 years, my life would still run out of time. So if you listen to my heart, every beat will say, thank you for the light, thank you for the truth, thank you for the way. So listen to our hearts, hear our spirit sing, a song of praise that flows for those you have redeemed. We will use the words we know to tell you what an awesome God you are. But words are not enough to tell you of our love, so listen to our hearts.
Our speaker tonight is Nathan Daly, and he has brought his lovely wife with him tonight. We're glad that she is here. And he is from Heritage Christian University. They worship at Mars Hill, I believe, worship at the Mars Hill congregation. Nathan's been at Heritage since about 2008, something like that. Yeah, and he teaches a lot of the Old Testament books of Hebrew. In Hebrew, of course, I know Hebrews is in the New Testament, but he teaches a lot of Hebrew. Justin's Hebrew professor, right? Yeah, great. And I taught him on a couple occasions when we were going through the Bible and teaching through or preaching through the Bible. When we got to Ezekiel, and I had some questions, and I called him. He was the one guy that I knew to call and ask him some things. And he is a very bright individual, and we're in for a treat to be able to have him with us tonight. And I'm glad that all of you are here to be able to hear what he has to say to us. So we won't take up any more of his time. You got it, Nathan.
All right, thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks to all y'all for having me out tonight. It's good to be here with you. Got a big crowd too. So tonight we're going to, actually, before I tell you what we're going to talk about, I just want you to think for a minute. And this is not smart on my part. I'll tell you to daydream first. But just think for a minute about what got you here tonight. Okay? And I mean, like, for starters, very literally, how you got here tonight. And what you're going to be doing as soon as this ends in the next 30 minutes or so. Because if you're anything like me, probably involves something like, I'm tired, I'm late, how am I going to do this again? And now you're at that point of, oh, and when I get back, I've got to, and it's already 8:30, right? So just kind of think about that in the real literal fashion for a second, because, we're always moving, all of us. We're just moving all the time. We talk about that a lot these days, I think, in terms of just how busy the world is, but it's a fact. We're busy or not, we're moving. Now think of it a little bit bigger, maybe than the specifics of the hour before you got here. Think of that question again. What got you here? Go as big as you want now. Go back as far as you need. What did it take to get you here tonight? And then take that other end, beyond trying to stay awake through the sermon and get yourself home, where are you going? What's life about for you? What's next? What's beyond, as far as you can think? So that's just the starting point of what we're talking about tonight. And we're going to be talking about, in line with all that, a metaphor, a literal thing that also serves as a metaphor that probably came up somewhere in most of your thoughts. Most of your thoughts, when you were thinking very specifically, probably had something to do with driving a car on a road to this building. And driving a car, there might be a couple people that walk, but most of you are involved in the road in some way, getting here and getting back. And so I want us to think about the road tonight as a metaphor and how that operates. When I was in school, and I think maybe half of you in here probably had this experience, I think I remember this. I know I read this poem, but I think I had to memorize it and recite it, and I can't do it now. But it's that Robert Frost poem. Yeah. Okay, a few of you remember reading it. It's pretty cynical. He's kind of looking back with some regret on these diverging roads and the one he took. And so we've got that kind of metaphor that we're familiar with. If you're not familiar with that, I don't know, the first movie that so many of us saw, Dorothy, and she's told to walk down the yellow brick road and not deviate from the path, right? Because what happens when she gets off the yellow brick road? It goes bad quick, right? But what's at the end of the yellow brick road? It's the answer to everything. It's the goal. So, there's a literal road in that movie, but at the same time, there's this metaphor underlying the travel that's going on. My personal favorite, maybe, let's see, some of the younger ones may know this from high school. This was a book, we didn't read it in high school because it didn't exist, but I think they read it now. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's on the high school reading list now. This father and this son, they're walking down a road. It's if you haven't read it, it's a post-apocalyptic love story between a father and a son. A father taking care of his son when the world has fallen to pieces and no one's left. And all he's telling his son is, we're just going to keep walking south down this road. That's all I know. His father's coughing. He knows he doesn't have long left. And every chance he gets to talk to his son, it's advice about what to do when I stop coughing and I'm not here anymore. And that's the book. They might meet some life here and there, and they've got to figure out whether they're the good guys or the bad guys every time, and they never know. And so it's dark, but it's got this literal and metaphor running through it. The literal road with the meaning of the road kind of tied in. All right, what's all this have to do with the Bible? We're going to talk about Proverbs tonight. And if you've ever read the Book of Proverbs, over 100 times in the book, there's this metaphor used. The way, the path, the road. It's used quite a bit in the book, and we're going to take a look at a specific text near the beginning of the book that kind of lays this, this theme out that we can follow through the rest as we read. But before we do that, I need to back up a little bit. I want to say a couple things about the Book of Proverbs before we get started. If you're familiar with the book, what you probably remember is those proverbs that are in it, those two-line sayings. They sound kind of like self-help or good advice. You just find one after another throughout the book, these two-line sayings. But if you've ever read the whole book, you know that the book is not all Proverbs, because the first 9 chapters of the book is actually full of speeches. So you've got woman wisdom, you've got the father talking to the son, and so you've got these speeches that are being made. And what we want to try to do tonight, and when we read this book in the future, is think about how these two sections of the book work together. How do these speeches in chapters 1 through 9 fit with this advice throughout the rest of the book? We'll give a couple of answers tonight, but one thing I want to go ahead and look at is, lucky for us, Proverbs is one of those great books that actually tells you what it's about at the beginning of the book. It's pretty rare that you have a book open up and say, hey, here's the purpose of the book, now you can read the rest of it. But I want to read a little bit from the beginning of the book, maybe starting in verse 2 of chapter 1. Their purpose, these proverbs. The purpose of these proverbs is to teach wisdom and discipline, to help one understand wise sayings. They provide insight, instruction, which is righteous, just, and full of integrity. They make the naive mature, the young knowledgeable and discreet. The wise hear them and grow in wisdom. With those with understanding gain guidance. They help one understand proverbs and difficult sayings, the words of the wise and their puzzles. Wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Proverbs is a book of wisdom, but it's not just a book of wisdom. It's a book of a certain type of wisdom. And the beginning of the book tells you what type of wisdom is central to the whole book, which is kind of funny because if I was ever to say, can you think of a book that's pretty secular in the Bible, that's real practical, that's just good advice? I'd say, well, Proverbs. But Proverbs doesn't say that. Proverbs says the opposite. Because if you get into Proverbs, it's like all this stuff about farming and, these good sayings and stuff. But the beginning of the book tells us this book has to be read in a certain way. And the way is in verse 7. The wisdom that you're going to gain with this book comes through the lens of the fear of the Lord. So what we find in Proverbs is a book that on the surface might look kind of secular, kind of like good advice, but if we start at verse 1, we find out it's something much more than that. It's how to live a life full of all these regular and ordinary things, but look at them in a certain way. Look at them differently than everybody else does. Look at them with the fear of the Lord. So the book actually isn't self-help at all. The book is setting out the difference between God and idolatry. It's a big statement that's made at the beginning of the book. So we read everything in the book through that lens. So the first 9 chapters then are these speeches that are setting up this kind of grand level structure about morality and what life is and who you are. And then all the sayings come in line with that. So the one we're going to read tonight is a speech from a father to a child. A child, much like in the book I was talking about just a minute ago, a child who's now about to leave home, and the father says, I'm telling you these things now so that when you encounter all this, like all these proverbs, all these regular life things, when you encounter all this in your life, you'll have the wisdom to know how to deal with them. All right? So we're supposed to be reading these 2 parts of the book together. And what we're going to find when we start reading here in just a second in chapter 4 is that one of the dominant images for all this is this image of the road or the way. So, let's look over there. We'll read through this in just a minute. What we're going to find as we read through the speech of this father is that, memorizing a bunch of proverbs might not do you a lot of good according to the father. Why? Because one of the proverbs is even, hey, fools can memorize these things, but they get them all messed up. So the purpose of the front part of the book is for the father to lay out the agenda so that the son knows how to interpret life when he encounters these things along the way. And how is he supposed to interpret life? Well, through the lens of God, through the lens of fearing the Lord. All right, so let's read this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the entire text here that I want us to deal with, and we're just going to kind of listen to it, and then we're going to read back through it again and just kind of hit a few important points as we walk through. So we're in chapter 4, and as I read through this, be listening for this imagery of the way or the path or the road. Be listening for where it goes, what it does, why is this imagery being used, and how is it being used differently. It's used for the righteous and for the wicked. So just kind of have your ears tuned in to those things as we read through it. So we're going to read chapter 4, verse 10 down to the end here. So listen, my son, and take in my speech. Then the years of your life will be many. I teach you the path of wisdom. I lead you in straight courses. When you walk, you won't be hindered. When you run, you won't stumble. Hold on to instruction. Don't slack off. Protect it, for it is your life. Don't go on the way of the wicked. Don't walk on the path of the evil people. Avoid it. Don't turn onto it. Stay off of it and keep going. They don't sleep unless they do evil. They are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. They eat the bread of evil. They drink the wine of violence. The way of the righteous is like morning light that gets brighter and brighter till it is full day. The path of the wicked is like deep darkness. They don't know where they will stumble. My son, pay attention to my words. Bend your ear to my speech. Don't let them slip from your sight. Guard them in your mind. They are life to those who find them and healing for their entire body. More than anything, you guard, protect your mind, for life flows from it. Have nothing to do with a corrupt mouth. Keep devious lips far from you. Focus your eyes straight ahead. Keep your gaze on what is in front of you. Watch your feet on the way, and all your paths will be secure. Don't deviate a bit to the right or the left. Don't turn your feet away from evil. All right. So I want us to approach this two ways. First, I want us to just, like I said, go back through the text slowly again and point out a couple of details. And then I want us to back up and look at some of the big issues that come out of this. So first of all, look at verse 10 with me where we started. So the Father is talking to the Son, listen to my speech so that you'll have a good life, so that you'll have long life. I teach you the path of wisdom. And we're thinking this in light of all that's coming in the rest of the book, all these proverbs that are laid out that, this child's going to encounter in the rest of his life. I teach you the path of wisdom, the road of wisdom. I lead you in straight courses. One thing that we need to pick up on here is who we're talking to. This is one of those things we like to blame it on everybody else, right? So it's not me, it's the kids. It's that other generation messing everything up. Be careful when you read texts like this, because this text is actually talking to us. We might think this is advice for children or something. It's not. What the Father is telling the child is, I have taught you all of these things all these years. Now you're about to go out on your own, and you need to be able to implement the moral teachings that I've set before you. And you need to be able to act on them when difficult things happen. You might have heard some extremes in this text. Good and evil, good people, bad people, light and dark. Everything's extremes in Proverbs. When you leave this building tonight, is everything extremes? Can you point to all the good people and the bad people? There's no such thing, right? Can you point to the light and the dark? Well, sometimes. But when you're in the real world, it's a lot more ambiguous. There's a lot more gray. And what do you have to do? To use some wisdom. And that's what the Father's been teaching the Son. When you go out in the real world, it's going to be a lot tougher than just this versus that, us versus them. And so what we're supposed to hear when we see the Father talking to the Son is the Father talking to all of us. Because what has he been doing? He's been teaching the Son his whole life. But what? The Son is moving into adulthood. This is kind of like a graduation speech, but way more personal. So you, at your graduation from high school or college, somebody gets up and gives an address to everybody and, to set them out on the path. And this is kind of what we have going on in Proverbs here. The Father is setting the Son, a son nearing adulthood, out on the path that he will go out on. So that really formats the way that we're supposed to read the rest of what we see here. So that's in 10 and 11. If we go down to the next verse here, when you walk on the path that I'm talking about, it's not going to be bad. You're going to run. You're not going to stumble. A lot of times when I think about paths in the Bible, I think about, it's tough to stay on the path. And we do have that imagery, right? It's tight. It's for a few. Everybody can't do it. But this is another image we need to keep on the table. Why is this path wide open? Why is it so easy? Why are you not going to stumble? Because remember the beginning of the book. If you're looking at the world through the eyes of the fear of the Lord, it's better. It's easier. It's more peaceful. It changes everything. And so what the Father is telling the child is if you view the world this way, like the way that I've been teaching you, the path is actually wide. It's easy. 14. Don't go the way of the wicked. Avoid it. Don't turn onto it. Stay off. Keep going. The Father has a real simple point here, right? Just stop. When you see this, don't, avoid. You see how many times he says that over and over right there? So there's a way that you can be, and all these imperatives are given. This way, the Father says, leads to darkness. He says, you've just got to get away from this, because where does it lead you? It leads you to this point where there's only one thing you can do when you go to sleep at night. If you go down this path, what is it about? Verse 16 here, they can't even sleep unless they do evil. They are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. The idea here is like, I got to win. I got to get them no matter what. And I'm only going to sleep in peace if I came out on top. And what does that mean about everyone else? Well, they're going down. This attitude is prevalent, right? We see this everywhere. And we just have to make sure that we ourselves are not a part of that. Because when you get to the point where you're so ramped up at what everybody else is doing that you can't relax in your own bed unless you got them, it's not a good place, right? And that goes heavily against the whole scheme that's being laid out in Proverbs here. So this is 14 through 16. If we jump on down to 18 and 19 here, we start to get this contrast between the righteous and the wicked, the light and the dark. We're familiar with it. We're very familiar with these images here. And like we said before, there's not like some kind of obvious every time we know the difference. But what the Father is doing, he's teaching the extremes so that when the Son encounters anything, he can start to evaluate these things with wisdom. And then that path of wisdom is laid out there in 20 through 27 there. What's really interesting when you look back at 20 through 27 is look for body parts. Just read that section, look for body parts. Just like eyes and heart and mouth and lips. I think eyelids is in there. Every part of the body, the feet, flesh, all these body parts are in there. Why? Well, one reason that is because of something that we're going to be seeing in a minute, is that what the Father is teaching the Son is he's saying, when you go out in this world, again, it's not just about right and wrong. It's not just about this or that. It's about those things, but it's about more. It's about straining every sense you have, every part of your body that you can think of, putting it all together to go in one direction, to go down one road, to go down one path. So the wisdom the Father's talking about here, it has to do with all of life. It has to do with transformation. It has to do with character, speech, behavior, all of it. Every sense you can think of in your body is involved, to the point that life isn't divided into sections anymore. All life is religion. You ever had that, like, I'm so busy, I've got so much going on, I just wish I had a few minutes to slide some spirituality in? That's a real issue that we all think about at some point or another. Maybe every day, definitely every week. I wish I could just slide a little more in. Proverbs is going to try to get us to turn that around and think a little bit different. You don't have to slide anything in, because for Proverbs, everything ordinary is spiritual. All of life is religion. What you need to do is reframe your definition of the road you're on. Not slide another good deed in there somewhere. You can do that too. I mean, Proverbs would say that as well. But Proverbs really wants you to evaluate the entirety of your life and what it is in a different way. Okay, so we've looked through this text a little bit. There's a lot more to do there, obviously. And having done that, we could go in a lot of different directions with a text like this, as we think about how we want to apply it, how we want to practice something like Proverbs 4. So there are a lot of things we can do, but I'm going to give several examples of how we might want to think through this. There's a couple things first, though, I don't want us to do. I don't want us to think this text is simple, because the very beginning of Proverbs says what? These are for wisdom. Wisdom is anything but simple, first of all. But it's wisdom for who? To make you righteous and just and have integrity. It makes the naive, it does make the simple mature, but it also does something else. It makes the wise grow in wisdom. Proverbs is an all-encompassing book if it's making that claim at the beginning. It makes the simpletons wise, and it makes the wise wiser. It's quite a statement. And so when we approach a text like this, we don't want to think this is a children's text. We don't want to think this is easy stuff. We want to get involved with it in a way that we push ourselves to ask, what is wisdom? And what does it mean to be on a path of wisdom focused on the fear of the Lord? So here's a few ideas. The first one is to think of the way or the road as tradition. Depending on who you talk to, tradition's a good or a bad thing. It's actually both. It is. It's good and bad. Using the way as an image to highlight tradition, I'm going to say is a very good thing. So what we're trying to think here is how can a path, how can that drive to church tonight on that road you came in on, how can that be tradition in that good sense? Certainly we don't bow to all traditions. The traditions we don't bow to. I mean, people do things and we don't do them just because our grandparents did them, right? But we don't not do them just because our grandparents did them either, right? So what would Proverbs say? Use some wisdom, figure it out. What are you going to do? So you drove tonight here on a road. How does that function as tradition? How does that function as spirituality? Usually the last thing we think on the road to church on a Wednesday night is, I'm partaking in a spiritual experience right now. Maybe we might be yelling because we got caught had a yellow light. The guy in front of us didn't go through it. We were going to go through it, and we had to, but we're not thinking this is a spiritual pilgrimage I'm taking. However, and it's hard for me to do that. I live 30 seconds from my church building. It's not much of a pilgrimage to get there. But, when I think through my life, I was telling you, take that bigger step back, what got you here. I think back through my life, I can hardly think of a time in my life where I didn't come to the church building several times a week. At this point in my life, it's just a well-worn path. It's just something that happens, what you're doing tonight is really strange. Very unique. It's 7:30, probably later now, right? 7:30, and you're sitting you're not watching TV. You're not, relaxing, getting ready for bed because you came here. You drove down a road that you've traveled many times, and you got here. It's interesting. It's worth reflecting on. What got you here? We had the old house we used to live in. We had this little hill on the sides covered in poison ivy, and the kids in the neighborhood would always run down the hill. And right in the middle, there's about a foot wide of dirt where they just trampled it, day after day as they cut between yards and stomped out the poison ivy. And where did they go when they needed to go between yards? Where did they go through the poison ivy? No, they'd done that before. They'd worked their way through it. They had this tradition, that they had built in, this dirt path, and they ran through it every time, every day. Was it smart to follow that tradition? Yeah. It did them a lot of good. Kept the poison ivy off their ankles in the summer. As they got a little older, got more interested in basketball and cars, and before we moved, I remember you could the path was still down there, but the poison ivy had grown over it again, right? And so, that path was just an everyday, no doubt where we're going, no doubt what we're doing. It's there for the next group of kids that needs to come through. And in a lot of sense, that's what the way is. I think of, it's probably really important here to say this kind of intergenerational mix we have at church. Again, another unique and unpopular thing, where what do we usually say about the generation that's older than us or younger than us? I can barely talk to them. I don't know what I don't get it. I don't get how they think. But in the church context, what are we thinking? I need to be here with them and for them to kind of keep that dirt path in place so that they've got something to see when I'm gone, when I move on, when I get too old to keep stomping it out. And so there's this real important sense in which this way that the Father is teaching the Son in Proverbs is something that we can think about in our churches, from the literal way we get here to the more figurative ways that we teach the generations that are around us. Related to this one is that we have this way or this road for community. And that's another, we can use the same image. We came here tonight, we'll do this one quicker, but we came here tonight down this road, and whatever we had in our mind doing it, fine, but what happened? We ended up in a room with 100 people. That's weird. Again, we ended up in a room with 100 people on a Wednesday night, all coming down our different paths to get here. Why is that important? Well, because what we experience when we do that is a very small way of what we're going to experience one day in the presence of God. This path that we all claim to be on, where are we heading? We're heading toward the presence of God, and we expect to be there with who? Community of God's people, the saints, right? And this is a small way that we mirror that several times a week. So we don't have to get down on having church buildings and having meetings and all that kind of stuff. There's a big theological point. You know, one of the most active theological, even evangelistic things you do all week is show up here. All right? You ever read those passages in Isaiah about the light to the nations? Why is Israel a light to the nations? Because they're doing something weird. They're doing something different, and others see it. In our culture, you can't get any stranger than what we're doing tonight. Okay? This is an important theological activity that we're participating in, one that mirrors our ultimate goal in the presence of God. Okay. My next one. This one's hard. The way as a path to transformation. We're getting near the end. We're not bad. The way is a path to transformation. What is transformation? This is something that Paul talks about a lot. He talks a lot about character, transforming your character, but not just transforming your character, transforming your being, transforming who you are. Paul has this idea that once we are Christian, we are transforming until we are ultimately transformed. So whatever it is that's going to happen to us in the next life, when we're glorified, when we are transformed, that thing that Paul talks about, he says on the way, we're to be transforming. We're becoming what we will become. We're practicing what we will be. And so Paul uses this language a good bit. How does that work with the language of the road or the language of the way? Well, the father ties all of this teaching in to the child's hands, feet, eyes, ears. Why? Because when he leaves the father, all senses, all experiences are going to need to be factored into the decisions made, to the wisdom that's used. He needs to constantly be transformed, be transforming, keeping his foot on that path. This is probably an important place to say, in Proverbs, the path is not about doing right or wrong. Those are important things in Proverbs. The path is even bigger and harder than that. The path is about moving toward that goal, moving toward the presence of God. And it takes all senses in order to experience that kind of transformation. And our final one, the way as the way. Have you ever heard, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The Gospel of John. When I read that, I always tend to reflect on truth and life. What does it mean for Jesus to be truth and life? But after reading Proverbs 4, I've got to add another one in there. What does it mean for Jesus to be the way? Well, Jesus is that tangible revelation, that way, that road that we have seen of how to be like God and how to get to God. When we think of Jesus as the way, and we've read this text, we think of this way that Jesus has defined in Jesus' being as something incredibly important for how we're going to make decisions and have focus in our own life. All right, so let's finish this up. The reason I have us focus on not so much right and wrong when we read this text, but on this bigger issue of goal, is because I think that what the Father is teaching the Son has something to do more with adventure than it has to do with homework. More with goal, more with challenge, more with being and meaning than a box to click. I think if the Father gave the Son 1,000 things that he should do and 1,000 things not to do, that would be a lot easier than what the Father did. The Father just set some parameters, didn't give the specifics. He told the Son, I've taught you to be wise, now be wise. So it's a much bigger, much more difficult thing. It's the difference between adventure and homework. And if you, again, in high school, I had to read Tom Sawyer. Terrible, terrible. I couldn't read a page of it. It was just awful experience. As an adult, I've probably read it 5 or 6 times. It's one of the most brilliant, funny, wonderful books ever. What happened? I didn't have to read it. That's what happened. I wanted to read it. That's what the way is, you know. Why is it easy? Why is it wide? Because we know God's at the end of it, and we want to be on it. So reading a book like Proverbs gives us some wisdom and some guidance on how to get there and how to manage that. It gets us away from speculation. It gets us away from fear. One of the great things about the way is the way that the Father deals with it. It's not about the past. It's not about the future. It's about the moment. The Father is talking about the next step, the current step even. Is the current step, is the moment. I'm always thinking about the past. What I did wrong, what I wish I'd done different. The future, it's terrible, you know, what I've got coming up. What the Father wants us to think about in Proverbs 4 is this next step. It's not if you messed up 20 of them. It's this one you're taking right now. Is that set on that one goal that's being defined by the fear of God? So we'll let that be our invitation at night. You know, we can see maybe the clearest example for us is this John 14 text where Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. And so we think about, all right, you know, we've got the wisdom from the Father here. We've got the example of Jesus. We've got this way set up. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to think about where we came from. We need to think about our traditions and what got us here. We need to think about our community, who we're here with. We need to think about the step we're taking right now and what the goal of that step is. And we need to think about Jesus and how Jesus exemplifies that way for us. So, as way of invitation, let's say if you have a need, you're here with your community of believers. You're here with your fellow travelers on the way. You all ended up at the same place, so we're all here for each other tonight. If there's something you need, something you need to express, I think we've got a song that we'll sing, and ask you to come forward and ask if you need help with anything.
Thank you, Nathan. I don't know if it's divine providence when you think about it, but been working on a lesson for Sunday and reading a book and getting some ideas of looking and seeing Jesus. We're looking at our December theme is in need of Jesus. And as we look through that, reframing our mind towards that, trying to find Jesus in the creation and looking through Jesus in the Old Testament. We talked about his pre-existence Sunday, and we're looking this week about in the Genesis account. And as you're delivering that, all I see is Jesus right there is the path. That it's right there, that this whole book that we have, what an amazing work of art that we have that has Jesus laid out on every page. If we just reset our mind to look at it and to see it as that way, as that path that gets us there. Thank you. Thank you for that breakdown of Proverbs. One more announcement. Sonny Owens and Jackie are both home with a cold. They've been visiting with us a good bit on Sunday night, and they wanted to make sure we were virtual, so they're watching us at home tonight. He's waving at us now, and we're waving back. So we're glad that he's able to do that. We're thankful to have Kirk and his family back with us. Kirk's back from Panama, went to Panama, and not Panama City, Panama, and did some work there for the Lord. And just look forward to seeing everybody on Sunday. Let's do our best to be here. Let's do our best to be here and frame our minds up to make sure we're in need of Jesus. Ken, you got our closing prayer?
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful for this time. We can come together in the middle of the week and meet as Christians and learn more of your word. We thank you for this message tonight. Father, we know there are many paths in life, but there's only one path, the way that leads to eternal life with you. And help us to share that message with the world and stay on it ourselves. Be with us the rest of this week. Thank you for watching over us and caring for us. In Jesus' name, amen.